Okay, people, we are back once again. This is Grand Strains. I'm Juice Wanna, and this is breaking news. Right. So, on this, we're going to be dealing with the indigenous people out in Canada. Now, I do have another indigenous story, but I decided to do that one separately because this is actually a long, it's not long, but it's a long enough story that is going to, I want that other story to get its own personal dealings because that one is dealing with the US. This is dealing with Canada and the Pope, right? The Catholic Church or the Roman Catholic Church. All right. So let me bring up this desktop picture here. Canada rejects Pope's apology for church's treatment of indigenous people. Right, as you know, the Pope had went out to Canada, so both these stories are actually connected. Right, I think I should have did the other story because it had to do with before he was actually getting to Canada, and this one is when he actually went to Canada. But I'll just keep it like this. All right. This picture was provided by Washington Examiner. Canada, rejects apology for church's treatment of indigenous people. And this will actually explain why the other story makes sense. Right? So it's better to go like this. Never mind. Nonetheless, here we go. Canadian government officials are pushing for more action from Pope Francis after he apologizes for Catholic Church's role in residential school for Indigenous people. The two highest ranking Canadian government officials were appreciative but also critical of France's response to the residential schools and push for an apology that went further in describing the abuse suffered at the schools, which in many cases were ran by the Catholic Church. Right? Canadian Prime Minister detailed what the residential school did to Indigenous children, arguing the Pope apology did not adequately address the experiences. The residential school, these children were alone and isolated in their pain and sorrow, far from their families and communities, and even were stripped of their language, their culture, and their identity, Canadian Prime Minister said in remarks while meeting with the Pope in Quebec City on Wednesday. Canadian Governor General Mary Simon, who acts as Queen Elizabeth II's representative in Canada and is Indigenous herself, welcomes the apology from Francis, but pushes for more to be done while also speaking at the same meeting. With this visit, you're signaling to the world that you and the Roman Catholic Church are joining us on our path to reconciliation, healing, hope, and renewal. But these people, these survivors, they defy definition. They are parents who defended their children when no one else would, Simon said. Simon said, right? The people who meets with various indigenous groups and leaders during his trip to Canada, the Pope. I said it, my fault. Is the Pope has met with various indigenous groups and leaders during his trip to Canada, looking to heal the church's image after its role in residential schools, separating indigenous children from their families and subjecting them to abuse. I humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the indigenous people. Francis said to a group of indigenous people, among with former resident attendees of the residential school in Alberta on Monday. Francis was criticized for not directly implicating the Catholic Church in his remarks, but he later remarked on local Catholic institutions having a role at the school during remarks Wednesday. The people is expected to the Pope. I said the people. The Pope is expected to visit the Notre Dame de Quebec Cathedral in Quebec on Thursday before returning to the Vatican on Friday. Today, right? Now, you know that we covered that story. Let's get into before he was actually coming, right? The Vatican says their gifts, indigenous groups want them back. You know, they gave them some stuff. You know, the Vatican museums are homes to some of the most magnificent artworks in the world, from Michelangelo Sistine Chapel in ancient Egypt antiquities in a pavilion full of papal chariots, but one of the museum's least visited collection is becoming the most contested before Pope Francis' trip to Canada. So, like I said, this was before he even was coming. The people were like, yo, you know what? We want our stuff back, man. You know what I'm saying? This is one of the ladies who let me see what her name is. Cassidy Karen speaks in the media in St. Petersburg Square after their meeting with the Pope Francis at the Vatican Monday. This is in March 28th, 2022. All right, so this is the young lady right here, okay? So now let's get into this story. All right. There's a lot of pictures, so every once in a while I'll be stopping to, really to show you the picture, but to also show you the information on who provided it. I won't be reading this. It's too much. Trust me, it's a lot. Right? Okay. The Vatican Anima, right? Mundi Ethnological Museum, located near the food court and right before the main exit, housed tens of thousands of artifacts and art made by indigenous people from around the world, which of it sent to Rome by Catholic missionaries for a 1925 exhibition in the Vatican's garden. This is when they was at the height of invading and, feeling like, their conquering was at its greatest. All right, so they go another picture right here. Let me show you this right here with them. There's with another speaker. As a matter of fact, I just take me away, I believe. Right? So you see that picture right there, right? So this is Gerald Antonio, right? Antone, I'll just bring it up there so you can see the writing, right? So like I said, it's a lot. I don't want to be rude to anybody, but, you know, you know how I do. All right, so the Vatican says the feather dresses, carved walrus tusk, mask, and embroidered animal skins were gift to the Pope Pius XI, who wanted to celebrate the church's global reach, its missionaries, and the lives of indigenous people they evangelized. Yeah, we want that back, buddy. We want that back. You know what I'm saying? You done corrupted these people. You know the shows that I do, and exposing not only the Catholic Church but other religions, as well as the upcoming spirituality religions, and King James's role in all of this. So you know how I get down with the invasion of the mind. So yeah. I'm happy the indigenous people are, well aware and they are coming to the light of reality. Right, here go, pardon me, here go another picture. All right, take me away. Once again, this is one of the speakers, Gerald Antone, you know. Then we have, General Chief Nathan Obed, and then we have Miss Cassidy Caron, right? Caron, right? Okay, so let's go. All right, this is provided by Associate Press. All right, just like to let you see what I'm seeing sometime. But indigenous groups from Canada who were shown a few items in the collection when they traveled to the Vatican last spring to meet with Francis questioned how some of the works were actually acquired and wondered what else may be in storage after decades of not being on public display. Right, so his claims that they were given, but they like, yo, wait, I don't even understand how some of this stuff even got here. Right, like we wouldn't have gave that to you. Some say they want them back. Right, these pieces that belong to us should come home, said Cassidy Caron, president of the Methodist National Council, who headed the Methodist delegation that asked Francis to return the items. I support the lady very much. This restorations of indigenous and colonial era artifacts and pressing debates for museum and national collections across Europe. It is one of many agendas items awaiting Francis on his trip to Canada. So, like I said in the last story, which begins Sunday. The trip is aimed primarily at allowing the Pope to apologize in person on Canadian soil for the abuse Indigenous people and their ancestors suffered at the hands of Catholic missionaries in notorious residential schools. Caron said returning the missionaries' collections items would help heal the intergenerational trauma and enable indigenous people to tell their own story. For so long, we had to hide who we were. We had to hide our culture and hide our traditions to keep our people safe, she said. Right now, in this time when we can publicly be proud to be Métis, we are reclaiming who we are. And these pieces, these historical pieces, tell stories of who we are. Get those pieces back. We want those pieces back in their hands. We don't want your apologies. I agree with her. She used the same talking points as the people, such as myself and my heritage taken out of Africa, right? And so, taking our language, our identity, all of that. We can't get certain things back because we're not even associated with the land to identify. At least they had that. So yes, I'm always support the fight for anybody and their identity. More than 150,000 Native children in Canada were forced to attend state-funded Christian schools from the 19th century until the 1970s in an effort to isolate them from the influence of their homes and culture. The aim was to Christianize and assimilate them into mainstream society, which previous Canadian governments considered superior. Right, so we understand the same psychological impact that they, did this globally. It wasn't just to blacks in America, right? This was a global attack on not just the physical body but the mental. All right. So again, we got some pictures here. Right. I want to show you, my fault, put the ad up there. Take me away. I want to show you some of their, this is their footwear. I want to see a pair of shoes made in the late 19th century. Right. So, yes, we want all of this stuff back for them. Right. We want this back. All right. Official Canadian policies in the late 19th century and early 20th century also aimed at suppressing indigenous spiritual and cultural traditions at home, including the 1885 potlatch ban, which prohibited the integral First National ceremonies. Right? Government agents confiscated items used in this ceremony and other rituals, and some of them ended up in the Museum of Canada. Give that back. The US and Europe, as well as private collections. The Vatican's catalog of its American collections, for example, featured the wooden painted mask from the Hadia Gowie Island, forgive me if I'm not saying this right, in the British Columbia, that is related to the Patlet ceremony. Yes, these should be returned. Ain't no way these people gave you that. You cannot, your people gave that to you. They did not give that to you. Ain't no way you gonna tell me they gave you this stuff. Right? This is what, some of the stuff that they are pointing out, right? Gallet made, this shows a pair of gauntlets, right? He made in the late 19th century, right? So these are gauntlets, right? So yes, I'm always tell you, I would never go against anybody reclaiming their identity. And that's why I decided to do the next story separately, right? During the spring visit, Nathan Orbit, who headed the Inuit Tekin, whatever, I'm sorry, let you see that. I don't want to be rude, right? All right. Right here. Delegation raised the issue of the Inuit, right? Kayak in the collection that was featured in the 2021 report in the Global and Mail newspaper. Orbit was quoted by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation as saying the museum had the Reverend Nicola Nappy was open to discussing the return. Listen, man, return that. The Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni didn't rule out that Francis might reciprocate some repartity, whatever. Okay. Some items during the coming trip, telling reporters, we'll see what happens in the coming days. Well, they didn't return them, did they? Clay tablets in human skin, 10 species collections and at the university stacks. Let me show you this picture again here. Right? Okay, so you see that there. Right? I can tell you this is a big article. It's a lot of stopping because it's a lot of pictures, right? Clay tablets to human skins. Libraries have long represented the heart of college campuses, both architecturally and academically, in addition to being hubs for studying, communing with other students, and researching archival records. University libraries hold often massive collections. Harvard has roughly 20 million volumes to its name. We're gonna come for you too. University libraries and museums also frequently have special collections, often consisting of rare manuscripts and archival collections, which are sometimes donated to the university by a prominent alum or philanthropist, but many special collections hold more unique and downright odd contents, right? To dive into the history of 10 special collections, Best University investigated the strange, remarkable, and occasionally shocking items kept by university libraries and museums across the country. Special collections can provide insight into historical figures, documented the stories of the Nietzsche, otherwise overlooked subjects, or illuminate the quirks of personal collections. These collections run from garments from the rare first edition of the Book of Mormon at Dartmouth, at a prodigious snow globe collection at the University of Cincinnati, and even a collection of materials and puppetry and clown housed at UC Santa Barbara. Continue reading to find out which universities have some of the most unique collection. There are international standards guiding the issue of returning indigenous central cultural properties, as well as individual museum policies. In 2007, UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, for example, asserted that nations should provide redress, including though residuance, right, of cultural, religious, and spiritual properties taken without their free, prior to informed consent, or in violation of their law, traditions, and customs. All right, so we got I believe this is a hat. Let me show you this. Right. These are some two mittens are made in the late 19th century. These are mittens. All right, look how beautiful these things are. All right, look how beautiful those things are. All right, let's see here. It is possible indigenous people gave their handiworks to Catholic missionaries in the 1925 Expo, or that the missionaries brought them, but historians question whether the items could have been offered freely given the power imbalance to play in Catholic missions and the government policy of eliminating indigenous traditions, which Canada Trust and Reconciliation Commission has called cultural genocide. All right, so take one picture. Like I said, there's a lot of pictures here. All right, there's a lot of pictures here. All right, these are some moccasins. All right, beautiful, beautiful. Now, what you see today in the UGG community, right? These are not Uggs, okay? All right. By the power structure of what was going on at the time, it would be very hard for me to accept that there wasn't some coercion going on in those communities to get these objects, said Michael Galban, a Wushu and Mono Lake Pautu, forgive me, I didn't get the name, who is director and curator of the Sinkia Art and Culture Center in upstate New York. Right? I know all up there, it's funny because a lot of their jails up there are actually named after like these, tribe. I know Mohawk and well, I know Mohawk. I forgot there was some other names was I don't know the name. Sorry, but I'll give you. I can give a list of them. I remember looking it up. Gloria Bell, a fellow at the American Academy in Rome, an assistant professor at McGill University Department of Art, History, and Communication Studies, agrees. Using the term gift just covers up the whole story, said Bell, who is of Metis ancestry and is completing a book about the 1925 Expo. We really need to question the context of how these cultural belongings got to the Vatican and when, also their relations to indigenous communities and also their relation to indigenous communities today. The Holy See's indigenous collections began centuries ago with some pre-Columbian items sent to Pope Innocent the 12th in 1692 and has been amplified over the years by gifts to Pope, especially on foreign trips. And the 100,000 items originally sent from the 1925 exhibit, the Vatican says it has kept 40,000. It is repatriated repatriated some items in 2021. Vatican News reports that the alumni Mundi had recently returned to Ecuador a shrunken head, which in rituals by Javarian people of the Amazon. Yeah, hand over that shrunken head, right? Christinian Fox, a Mohawk filmmaker who served as spiritual advisor in the spring First National delegation, said she saw items that belonged to her people and need to be repatriated or brought back home to the motherland. You can sense that that's not where they belong and that's not where they want to be, she said. Of the wampum belt, war clubs, and other items she documented with her phone camera. Right, the Vatican Museum declined repeated requests for the interview or comment, but in 2015 catalog of the American holding, the museum said they demonstrated the church's great esteem for world culture and its commitment to preserving their art and artifacts as evidenced by the excellent condition of the pieces. If that's how you want to if that's how you want to say it, cool with me. That's how they always, say it about these museum pieces. The catalog also said the museum welcomes dialogue with indigenous people, and the museum has held up its collaboration with Aboriginal communities in Australia before. And like, believe it or not, let me stop there for a second. Believe it or not, um that was like one of the first non, African environments, but I recognize them as black. I did my true hardest studies and research on. So a lot of what you see, my foundation of research came out of the indigenous people in Australia, the Aboriginals, right? And that history is crazy. right, on how they actually went in there, right? And the museum has held its collaboration, Australian 2010 exhibit. The collection's director, Matt Pelly, right, a missionary priest and an associate visited those communities, took video testimonies, and traveled the world seeking more information about the museum's holdings, ongoing and revamping Mundi gallery space in 2019. The artifacts from Oceania, as well as a temporary Amazon exhibit, Francis said the items were carried for with the same position reserved for the masterpiece of the Renaissance or the immortal Greek and Roman statues. He noted that some items have recently been loaned to China and said the collection invites us to live human fraternity, contrasting the culture of rancor, racism, and nationalism. Francis also praised the museum's stated commitment to transparency. Nothing the glass partition showing the storage facility upstairs and the restaurateurs' workstations on the main floor. Transparency is an important value above all elastic institutions. You might miss the alumni Mundi if you were to spend the day in the Vatican's museum. Official tours don't include it, and the audio guide, which features descriptions of 24 museums and galleries, ignore it entirely. Private guides say they rarely take visitors there because there is no explanatory signage on display cases or wall text panels, so they just buried it, right? Margot Neely, who helped curate the Vatican's 2010 Aboriginal exhibition, as head of the Center for Indigenous Knowledge at the Australian National Museum, said it is unacceptable for Indigenous collections today to lack informational labels. Yeah, you got to hand that back. What do you mean? You don't even have labels for these things. All right, they are not being given the respect they deserve by being named in any way, said Neil, a member of the Kulin and Gambian, I'm sorry, I know I didn't get that right, nations. They are beautiful displays, but are culturally diminished by the lack of acknowledgement or anything other than their exotic otherness. It wasn't clear if the current exhibition was a work in progress. The labels eventually to be added at the gallery's entrance. A text panel asked to donations to fund the collection. Museum and governments around Europe and places like Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium are grappling with the question of their colonial and post-colonial collections and leading the discussion of legally transferring property back, experts say, with some exceptions. The trend is increasingly towards reparation. Recently, agreements were announced in Germany and France to return pieces of the famed beanie bronzes to Nigeria. I respected that one. There is a certain willingness growing in a number of European countries to return objects and archives and ancestral remains, said Jos van Buren, who runs a group email list in a Facebook group, Restoration Matters, and tracks developments in the field. In Canada, the Royal British Columbia Museum has gone so far as to create a handbook empowering Indigenous communities to reclaim their cultural heritage. In Victoria, the city where the museum is located, Gregory Schofield has amassed a community collection of about 100 items of Metis bread beadwork, embroideries, and other workmanship dating from 1840 to 1910, tracked down and acquired via online auctions and through travel and made available to Metis scholars and artists. Schofield and Metis poets and authors of the forthcoming books, Our Grandmother's Hands, respiratorian Mantis Material Arts. Repatriations, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is, said any discussion with the Vatican's museum should focus on granting Indigenous scholars full access to the collections and immediately bring items home. These pieces hold our stories, said those pieces hold our history. These pieces hold the energy of those ancestral grandmothers. Right? So once again, like I said, I support this 100%. So when I read this story, I said I'm gonna give it its due diligence and pay attention to them. So if anybody I didn't, say your name right, if I didn't say the tribes right, forgive me. I will take the time to on my personal time to actually get those names to a better pronunciation, just out of respect for y'all. Peace. Once again, this is Grand Strains. Right? Let me throw up my ads there. This is politics as usual. This is breaking news. Right? And today, we just once again offering you a piece of history from around the world, from your neighbors, mine, and yours. Peace. One. We out of here, people.